Hello, free spirits, welcome back. We often hear about the importance of taking care of our mental health, but we rarely ask ourselves, how do I know if I have a mental health problem? How do I know it is time to seek professional help from a psychologist, a counselor, or a mental health professional? Stay with me, I'm gonna answer that question today. There is no universal agreement among mental health professionals and medical practitioners about what it is abnormal behavior. The DSM-5 is the Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. This is where mental health professionals, counselors, and psychologists go to determine if a person has a mental health issue and what could be the diagnosis. The DSM-5 defines abnormal psychology as a syndrome that is present in an individual and that involves clinically significant disturbance in behavior, emotion regulation, or cognitive functioning. Modern psychology has provided several red flags or key areas that we can look into to determine if a person has abnormal behavior or a mental health issue. The challenge is that not one single of these areas or red flags determines if a person has a mental health disorder. Subjective distress is psychological pain. These are people that have a lot of distress, psychological pain, sadness, maybe depression, and it is psychologically painful and even physically painful because our mind and body are connected. But this characteristic by itself doesn't determine whether or not a person has a mental health issue. A person who is going through dwelling because of the death of a relative or a very close friend or family member obviously is going to go through psychological pain, emotional distress. But that doesn't mean they have a mental health issue. Maladaptiveness affects our well-being and our quality of life. A person with maladaptive behavior may have chronic depression, for example, and they may withdraw and stay isolated from friends and relatives for long periods of time. However, again, these characteristics alone doesn't indicate that a person has a mental health issue. There is a part of science that says that people who are highly intelligent, they are loners. They prefer to spend long periods of time alone. But this is different from being antisocial or have chronic depression. Statistical deviancy means that a person could be statistically away from the norm. The norm is considered normal behavior, the behavior that most people present. But this alone is not a characteristic for mental health disorders. A person may be a genius and this person is statistically deviant from the norm, but they don't have a mental health issue. Violating social norms could be another red flag to consider a person to have abnormal behavior. But this, again, by itself could not be the only way to determine if a person has a mental health disorder. Because we know that sometimes social norms are provided temporarily according to the context of our society. Laws, norms, and regulation have to be flexible and they change with time. So we cannot judge or categorize a person to be abnormal if they deviate from social norms, especially those that don't make sense or are arbitrary or unjust. People who create a lot of social discomfort to others could be also categorized as maybe presenting abnormal behavior. But again, this depends a lot on the context and the circumstances of the moment. People who make others feel uncomfortable could be people that are perceived as standing too close to yourself when you're talking, or maybe they are talking and they are shouting and yelling excessively. So this could be a red flag, but not necessarily, because we have to take into consideration cultural differences and maybe personalities that maybe appear to be abnormal for one culture, but they are completely normal for another culture. Irrationality is when a person behaves without logic, without common sense. Being irrational is lacking mental clarity, and these people sometimes can be dangerous and unpredictable. Even when some unpredictability and spontaneity in life is the spice of life and it can be good for ourselves, too much spontaneity and too much unpredictability that are away from the norm could be another red flag that a person may need some mental health help. A person who is a danger to himself or herself or to others could also be considered psychologically abnormal. But again, it depends on the circumstances. If, for example, you are being attacked unjustifiably and you defend yourself, you could be considered acting in self-defense. So even when this is dangerous behavior, it would not be considered abnormal. Abnormal behavior is based on values and expectations of society at the time. It even changes from generation to generation. This is why it is very important as mental health professionals and coaches to not judge or categorize a person immediately based on a definition of abnormal psychology or abnormal behavior. Homosexuality was considered a mental health disorder no long time ago, and it was included for many years in the DSM-5 as a mental health issue, until it was removed in 1974. As always, take care of yourselves, stay healthy, and I will see you in the next video.